Hi there, my name is Annie Herlocker. I'm the manager at the Richland Park Branch Library. Today I'm going to show you how to make an Origami Star Book. This is essentially the combination of a basic origami fold combined with an accordion style book structure. So here is an example of what that looks like. You can see the hard covers on either side. It folds all the way out. These nice folded triangles and squares. Folds all the way back down. Very flexible type of book. Let's get started.
You will need the following supplies to make your Origami Star Book. You'll need 5 square sheets of paper. This is a lightweight paper. I decided to go with the size 5 by 5, so each side is 5 inches long, so you will need to pre-cut those square sheets of paper. You'll need a Sharpie or a bone folder. So I use this when we flatten down our folds. You'll need a pair of scissors, a pencil, a ruler. School glue will work, any type of just basic glue, and I recommend having some type of bowl or cup so that instead of using the tip here, you can actually use a brush, which you'll need as well, which allows you to paint on the glue a little bit more effectively, and some kind of utility knife or X-Acto blade. A cutting mat is always a good idea. And if you choose to do the cover, which you don't have to do the cover is a little more advanced because it does require using an X-Acto blade. The book functions all on its own without the cover, but if you decide to do the cover, and I'll show you here, cover is made out of a very thin, lightweight board called book board or chipboard. And I have a piece here, about an 8.5 by 11 piece, which will be plenty for my 5 by 5 book. So something like this will work. You could also rummage through your recycle bin and see if you have a very thick piece of food packaging, like a thick cereal box. You could try it. It might bend a little bit when we apply the glue, but it's worth trying. Need a piece of cover paper if you're doing the hard covers. So this is again about an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, which will be plenty for the size book I'm doing, and it's just slightly thicker than the text weight paper. So go ahead and gather your supplies. So you should have your 5 squares of perfectly square paper that you pre-cut. I'm going to show you how to fold each square. If you can kind of look here, you can see that this one actually has 3 squares. By the way, this book works best if you're doing the cover, if you have an odd number of squares. So this has 3. The book we're going to do today will have 5. But there are 3 squares glued on top of each other after they were folded. So I'm going to show you how to fold your squares. I'm going to do 2 for the video, and you can stop and replay at any time, but you will need to eventually fold all 5 squares, and they will end up looking something like this. So let's get started. And I have a mixture of patterned paper and plain paper. So you'll lay your square down and you're going to fold this edge over to this edge. You're going to be as careful as you can to line up each corner, and then just use your forefinger to smash that down a little bit, and then I'm going to use my Sharpie marker to flatten that fold. If you had a fancy bookbinding tool, this is called a bone folder. This one's actually made out of Teflon, but traditionally they are made out of bone. And then you just flatten that down or crisp up that fold. Open that up. And this is a basic type of origami. So this book is a blending of an accordion book and origami folds. And it's also what you would call an adhesive binding, because if you do the cover, we're going to be using adhesive. So those are just the fancy bookbinding terms. So now you're left with a square with 4 squares inside of it. And this next part is the tricky part, and the one you may need to replay a couple of times. It's fine if you don't get it at first. This takes a while to figure out. I'm going to turn mine over, and I'm going to do an X at the top left. I'm going to do an X at the bottom right. I'm not going to do this on every one, but it's a good way to illustrate the corners that we are going to be folding into our star. So I'm going to flip it back over. My X is there and there. So essentially what I am doing is, and we'll redo this, is I'm going to be folding this square in half. So I want a line going down, having the square. And I'm going to do that by joining this edge of the square with this edge of the square. Kind of hard to explain, a little bit easier to show. You end up with something like this. So as it is now, it looks like this. And it's much easier to go ahead and do both squares. I also need to have a line fold right in the middle of that square. So I'm going to take my finger and just push that in the middle of that one and try to pinch it here at the bottom. So now you should be left with something that kind of looks like this, kind of a sandwich of folds. And I'm going to unfold it again just so you can see what it's starting to look like. It started out as a square. I put my finger in the middle of one, folded it in. You will get, depending on your type of paper, it might want to bunch up around here. Just pinch it. Doesn't need to be perfect. And I'm going to pinch that other one. So once you are at a point where it looks like this, you can lay it down on your table or on your mat. Line up your edges, your corners. You're just going to flatten that down, and that's going to fold everything for you. It's kind of a self-folding book here, so you're left with this. So this is one of our pop-outs, or one of our pieces that's going to contribute to this star book. So I'm going to do one more, but then you'll want to finish all 5 of your squares. So you'll watch me fold this. So if you have, I have essentially content, right, because I have artwork. Suminagashi marbling is what it's called on one side, but I'm still going to just fold this way because I can always reverse my folds later. So I'm going to do that. It's a hot dog fold, right? I'm going to go back, do another fold here. I've got my 4 squares, and from that top right square, I guess I'm right-handed, so I probably do the right square, but as long as they're opposite, it doesn't matter. This one's a little trickier, but I'm just going to pinch it so they meet. I'm not worried about that corner because I know that when I go to place it on the table and I flatten those folds, it's all going to even out. Looks kind of like a lotus flower. Even up those edges and fold that down. So now I have my second piece that looks like that. Reminds me of a duck beak, or a bird beak rather. So I have 2 of my 5 done. So you'll want to stop the video, replay if you need to, and you're going to want to fold all 5 of your papers like that. So I hope you were able to get all 5 squares folded. And next step is you're going to want to set them out in order of how you want them. If you did all white paper or all plain paper, any order is fine, but if you happen to have something on your pages, like I have some decoration on some, and you wanted them in a particular order, go ahead and do that. So I have mine alternating the marbled with the purple, and because they are all folded the same way, I did that same fold for all of them, I do now have to alternate or reverse the folds of 2 of them. So the way that this joins up is they're kind of opposite as they join. As you can see, if you can see here, it's kind of hard to hold this up, but we've got alternating folds that go in on that first square, and then on the second square, the folds go the opposite direction, and it alternates. So if you can't see that, don't worry about that too much. It's kind of confusing to talk about, but I can show you a little more easily. So I have my setup, and I'm going to lay that way so that my square is on the other side, or is on the outer side. So with my next one, my purple, I know that I need to actually reverse all of these folds. So you just take every fold and just fold it the other way. Fold it that way and fold this fold the other way. Here we go. Then you just kind of have to work with it a little bit. Make sure everything is there. So essentially, it's sort of backwards. I just reversed or folded backwards every fold. So we're going to set this in here, how it's eventually going to be glued on there. Or double stick tape actually works really well as also. So that is going to sit like that. And then the next one, I don't have to do any refolding to. That's going to set in there like that. I'm going to do one more reverse fold. So just fold every fold that you see backwards. Okay. I find it's easier to just fold them one way first and then refold them as opposed to thinking about it the other way. But that's just how my brain works. So now it is like that. And you could certainly glue on the underside as well. So maybe I would do that to show my pattern, or you could glue on top. And then you have your last page, and that's going to go in there like that. And I think I will glue on top of my purple. No, I have to decide here. So, and then you'll glue that there. So you're essentially gluing the large flat square surfaces to each other. You can glue under, or you can glue over. So now we're going to get our glue and start adhering everything. So I'm going to set this up here. It's always useful to have a scratch piece of paper to glue on so you don't glue directly onto whatever surface you're working on, like a kitchen table. So I think I am going to glue my non-pattern piece underneath my pattern piece just so I can show off a little more of the marbling. So you could either put your glue on this surface or this surface. If you're not comfortable using the glue, you could use a glue stick. You could even use double stick tape. Works really well for paper art, for book art, and that would make it a little easier. But I'm going to show you how to use the glue if that's what you choose to do. So I'm going to put my adhesive or my glue on this square. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of glue, not too much, and I'm just going to pull this direction. I want to get up close to the folded edges, but I don't really want to go too far over it. And this is just lightweight paper, so you don't need a ton of glue, just a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to set that down. I'm going to move that away from where the glue is. And now I'm just going to situate this square on top of this square as closely as I can. So you can see I can still kind of move this square around if you don't get it perfectly placed. But this is what it looks like from the back. I'm going to take my Sharpie and just flatten that glue down. Or if you have a bone folder, you want to get out all those air bubbles. If you have some glue pop out of your edge, that's called glue squeeze out. It's fine. You would just rub your finger and wipe it off. It'll dry very quickly. So whoa, it's starting to look like the Star Book already. So we have our first two. So we'll put that to the side. We're going to grab our next one. And this time I'm going to adhere this square to this square. And again, I'm going to put my adhesive on the purple square. This is already dry where I had some glue here. So I'm just going to dab just a tiny bit. A paintbrush, if you have a paintbrush or a watercolor brush or any type of craft brush, that will work. You just don't want it to be too big. I'm just going to spread that glue. Okay, and I'm going to take this and put that in the square as even as I can. I have a little bit of squeeze out. Not too worried about it. It's going to dry clear. This is clear glue. So try not to worry about being a perfectionist. Sometimes that can keep us from just doing things and trying new things. Okay? And we're going to lift that up, turn it over, and flatten that glue out again. So I mentioned earlier that you need to have an odd number of these folds in order to put the cover on. And that is because, you can kind of fold that together, your cover, the way the folds are, you need to end up with a flat square on one side and a flat square on the other. If you do an even number, you'll end up with a folded square on the edge. So at this point where you have 3, you could stop and fast forward to the part where I'm going to show you how to do the cover, or you could glue on your 2 additional, which I'm going to do, and then we're going to start the cover. I have finished gluing all 5 squares together, and so now I have the inside of my star book complete. And if you're not going to pursue the hardcover, then you're done. You can go ahead and start writing in your book or putting drawings in there. You could probably even tuck little things in there. You can do whatever you want with it. If you're gonna hang tight for the cover, let's get the cover. So it is kind of tricky to get it all folded in, but you just want to take 1 square at a time. So we're going to make a cover for each side. The easiest way to do that is to get your board, your chipboard or your food packaging, and you can see here I laid it down in the corner, and I want just a tiny bit of board to show outside of the square. So if you can see there, I'd say maybe 1 millimeter, maybe 2 on either side, and I'm just going to kind of eye it. So I'm going to take my pencil, make sure you can see this, and I'm just going to make a mark on either side, just a little bit to the outside of the book. Those little dashes are just so I can take this off and then use my ruler to connect those lines. Okay, and then you'll use your X-Acto knife You may want to have a parent help you with this if you're younger, or you may be an adult using this or a teenager. Just be careful. Remember, you never want to press down hard. That indicates that your blade is not very sharp, and that's where you are at a point where you risk hurting yourself because you're pushing too hard. So just with your X-Acto knife down, several passes until you can feel the board loosening up. Turn it around. Same thing, several passes until that board is loosening up. Still attached a little bit there. So you have one cover board, and that looks good. So go ahead and use this as a template to now trace your second board. You're going to cut that out. You want to always make sure, keep your fingers out of the way of the blade. Okay, so now I have two covers. They are about the same size here. If you have an edge, these are not perfectly square, but as long as they are the same size to each other, that's all that matters. If you have a little edge that you feel is a little off square, if your board is thin enough, you can just use scissors to kind of even that up. Okay, so now you can put these things to the side here. And I'm going to grab my cover paper. So we are going to wrap these boards in cover paper. I want to have about a 1/2 inch of paper. You can see that's about a 1/2 inch all the way around each board. So I'm going to eye that. And actually I'm just going to use my corners as an edge that I don't have to cut. save my cutting time. And then I'm going to eye that and draw a little bit of a line there. You can certainly measure this. You can take the time to measure this. I feel it's important in learning bookbinding that we don't become too precious about making everything exact, because like I said, it can really prevent you from just diving in and trying to learn something new. These details are not as important on this type of book. So I'm going to take these off and I'm just going to use my scissors. But certainly if you want to get into more fine bookbinding, take your measurements. It's going to make for a more polished version. And if that's what you're going for, you would want to take those extra steps, definitely. Okay. And this cover paper is a handmade paper. It's nice. It's a little bit thicker than the paper that I use for the content here. It's going to hold up well to gluing. So this type of paper, like a computer paper or typing paper, isn't going to hold up as well when you cover it in glue. So I just want to let you know that something slightly thicker, but not as thick as cardstock is going to be best for this. So now I'm going to glue up my boards and just dip your brush in. I always start from the middle of the board and pull the brush out to the sides. That's not a very thick coating. I don't know if you can tell. It's not very thick at all. Just pull out to the sides there. Okay. And just put that eye in the middle, and then use your bone folder to flatten that down. You want to get all the air bubbles out. Just as much as you can there. You can even outline your board. And so you'll have something that looks like that. Set that aside. We're going to glue up our second board. Glue in the middle, pull outward. This helps to ensure that you don't get a heavy bead of glue on your outer edges. That's where you're going to get that squeeze out, which can sometimes be a problem if you have a really nice decorative paper and you don't want to get glue everywhere. Again, glue down, glue side down, as much in the middle as you can, and then use something like a Sharpie or a bone folder to flatten it down. You want all those air bubbles out. All those air bubbles out. And I like to run the edge along there because I am going to need to fold those edges over. Okay, so now you have two covers, and you can see it's starting to curl just a little bit. After you cover your covers, the best thing is to really set it under weight, like under a can of vegetables or can of soup, for a couple hours until it dries. Because of this thin board, glue is adding moisture, and as you've seen, if you've added water to a piece of paper, it will start to curl in. So now we're going to glue down the sides. This next part is kind of fun because you get to cut off these little triangles. So you're going to fold in this triangle just as much as you can to the middle. You can see what I'm doing here. So I'm folding this corner straight into the middle, and it's forming a line, a bisecting line right outside of that corner. Just fold that in. And then you're just going to use your scissors and you're going to cut just to the outside or the right side of this folded line. So I'm just going to cut right to the outside of that folded line on all 4 lines. This is going to give us just enough paper. You have 4 little triangles to cover the board without being too bulky. So now you're going to take just a little bit of glue, cover that in there. You can use your finger, run that along the board. You really want adhesive on the edge of that board, and then you're just going to fold it over. You can use your bone folder to make sure that's nice and adhered. Okay, do the other side. You can even fold it against the table or use your fingers, but you really want that edge to be adhered. Okay. Now the opposite two are a little trickier because you have this little corner here that you want to make sure you're getting glue in. So make sure you get glue in that little corner, and here's what we do with that. So that is our corner that slightly covers the board. So you just fold that in. Not sure if you can see that. So you just fold that in. So that little extra just tucks right on top of this board edge so that you're covering your board. And then you fold over your flap, making sure air bubbles are out. So you have a really nice folded corner. My next board, off camera, and you can rewind this if you need to see the covering again. Okay, so now I have both of my covers covered in their cover paper, and I'm ready to attach them to my book. So this is kind of the exciting part because you're almost done. So I have my text. I'm going to condense it all just into the square. As you can see here, these are going to just go right on the outside. And we're just going to be gluing the outside paper right into the center. So we're just going to center it as much as we can. So go ahead and set one of your covers down. I'm going to put a cover over here. And this is the square, the outermost square you're going to be gluing. So flip it over, grab a little bit of glue, and just like we did before, you don't want to go too far over your edge. The paper is curling a little bit. That's just what paper does. We talked about the moisture. So you're going to let it, best thing to do is to just let it curl a little bit. It'll curl and then it will relax just a tad. And then I just kind of open that up and center my paper. And the glue, there's enough glue on there that I can kind of move it around a little bit. I've got some pliability. So I'm just going to kind of center, have a slightly equal amount, as much as you can, of the blue all the way around. Then you can just flatten it down. Hold your book a little bit and flatten that paper down with either your bone folder or your Sharpie. You just want to get gently. So we've got one cover, and now we can go ahead and do our second cover. And I'm going to fold my scrap paper here so I have a dry spot. Okay, and then I'm going to place it down on the square, just as centered as I can get it. It's okay if it's not perfect, and you can move it around. So just kind of adjust that. Just flatten that down, and we're done. We have a star book.